Rob, can you hear us okay?
Yep.
It is 7:04 p.m. on June 7th, 2022. We'll call to order this regular meeting of the Reading Board of Education for the month of June. Present in person are myself, Chris Parker, John Hoffman, Laura Davis, Stephanie Fulton, and John Bellotto. Joining remotely is Shirag Sadana. The first item of business is the consent agenda, which is the approval of minutes from May 3rd and May 22nd. Are there any questions, comments, or concerns on May 3rd minutes? Any questions, comments, or concerns on the May 24th minutes? I would suggest on May 24th, a couple of things. On page 6, between the motion that failed 0 to 5, and then the new motion approved 3 to 1. I think we could insert that further discussion ensued, just to be clear, they weren't consecutive. Then in the next non-bolded line, after much discussion, I would rephrase to say after much discussion, ready to deliberate upon the original motion again. I wouldn't say that the other boards asked them to do it necessarily. And then the third comment would be on page 5, on to page 6, those initial motions refer to accepting a budget. I don't want to confuse the public into thinking we're voting on a budget that was accept the administrator compensation levels for fiscal year 2023. That all makes sense.
I missed where that was, that last.
Bottom of 5, top of 6, about compensation. I didn't catch the exact wording of the motion in real time, but I don't think it's a budget. I would suggest adopting the budget, adopting the minutes with those revisions for clarification.
Instead of budget, what did you say? Central office salary?
Administrator, central office administrator compensation for fiscal year 20.
Yep.
Can I have a motion to adopt the May 24th minutes with those revisions? Second for it. Any comments? All in favor? Shirag?
Yes.
With no comments or concerns about the May 3rd minutes, they'll be deemed approved by unanimous consent. That brings us to public comments. Members of the public wishing to be heard. Once or twice. Board member comments. Administrative reports, Dr. McKenna.
Okay, good evening, everyone. We're going to start our administrative report this evening with Melissa giving her principal report from Reading Elementary School.
Good evening, everyone. I can't believe we are in the home stretch. It's already June. It's amazing. There are some days where I feel like I've been here forever, and then there are some days where I'm like, it's incredible. So May was a lot of fun. We had a staff versus parent kickball game. Dr. McKinnon, we could have snuck him running into a home plate. We had a really great time. A big shout out to Ms. Ambrosio and Ms. Edmonds, two of our first grade teachers who collaborated with our PTA to make sure we had such a really fun event. We have a lot happening the month of June, which is a really good feeling because we are starting to get back into a lot of the activities and happenings that we did prior to COVID. So it's very exciting to know that we will be having field day on June 17th. Big thank you to Ms. Starkey and Ms. Camarado for planning such a really fun event for all of our students. We will have our first orchestra concert on June 15th. It will be taking place at 9:30 in the morning. It is our first concert, I think, in over 2 years. Ms. Edwards has done a really fantastic job preparing our students. We are able to have one guest per student to be able to come and see it live, but we will also be live streaming for any families who wish to watch at home. The end of the month, before we get out of before we hit the ground running for summer. Our kindergartners will be having an experience where they can actually have lunch in the cafeteria, which is something new. We don't traditionally, our kindergartners don't typically eat in the caf, they eat in their classrooms, but to kind of support that transition to first grade, we'll be able to experience that for the first time. And then we have a big event, our fourth grade stepping up ceremony, which will be on June 21st at 9:30. It is a wonderful opportunity to support our fourth graders as they transition to John Reed, and also to kind of acknowledge and celebrate all of their accomplishments during their time at RAS. I do also have a kindergarten registration update. As of right now, we are up to 66 children who have registered for kindergarten. We pretty much have almost all completed paperwork. I think we're missing maybe one or two families that still need to turn in some documents. I did talk to some staff, and I think it is on the lower side for this time of year typically, but anything can change as we go. I don't know if it's noticed, we might get inundated by families registering, but as of right now, we're at 66.
I feel like we picked up probably 5 or 6 students over the course of this year, is that about right?
Throughout the school year?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've had a handful of students register in all in different grade levels. Any other questions?
So there's only a handful of packets still out.
Yeah, we pretty much, I think there was 1 or 2 families we were getting paperwork from. The rest have either pre-registered or in Power School, ready to go, or they're incoming from currently in preschool, and we know they're coming for kindergarten next year.
Questions?
Thanks, Melissa. Megan? No, this is not your last report. There's one full board meeting on June 28th. There's some potential at the moment.
Is that true?
That is.
Okay, so it is that. Well, can I start by saying thank you to everyone here? Okay. As I said to the staff at John Reed on Friday, it was a hard Friday for all of us. It was never my intention to be going anywhere so soon. And Weston was an opportunity that presented itself, and it passed by my desk once, and I passed, and it came by again. And it was just one of those things that I couldn't pass up. But I really appreciate the opportunity, all of the work that the John Reed staff did this year to really impact the students and climate and culture at John Reed. And I'm so hopeful that will. And I really want to thank you for the opportunity. Weston, it's just one of those opportunities. It was the only, I was really clear, it was the only job I applied to. I was not out there looking. So thank you. I want to start by acknowledging some of our 8th graders. I don't know if this is typically how this happens, but I had the pleasure of being at the Western Connecticut Superintendent's Association Awards Night, and we honored from John Reed in Birmingham and Maddie Kerr, which was a wonderful night. Dr. McKinnon and others attended, so I want to acknowledge Ken and Maddie, and a couple other 8th grade awards. We also typically give out a CAVE award, and this year we, rather than participating in CAVE, we named it our Principal's Leadership Award, and that is going to Tyler and Maya Dallas. We want to acknowledge them. And the Connecticut Association of School Scholar Leader Award, which we just attended last night at the Aqua Turf, which I've never been to the Aqua Turf. We honored Michael Sherman and their scholarship and leadership in their tenure at John Reed Middle School. So those were some really exciting nights for us at John Reed. And they will also be acknowledged and again awarded in front of their peers in our awards event that happens Friday morning, the morning of graduation here in the creative for students only. So it's for staff and students to reflect on and honor our 8th graders. We were happy to have our 4th graders come into John Reed Middle School on the 31st. They joined us in the community room where we talked about expectations for middle school. We we settled some nerves as well in terms of how we take care of them. They took a tour of fifth grade and other areas of the building that they might frequent. And then later on that night, we welcomed fourth grade families and caretakers into this room where we talked about our goals for John Reed and how we support fifth graders when they come into John Reed. So we think we settled some nerves there too. We know the fourth grade to fifth grade transition can be hard, just thinking they're coming into the middle school. So knowing that they're really somewhat isolated at times in their core academics and that fifth grade hallway is reassuring, and all of the support that the teachers provide to students as well. We've also shifted our schedule for next year for fifth grade. So there's a 15 minutes built into the start of the fifth grade morning, and there's 10 minutes built into the end of the fifth grade. So we're really treating that as like a morning meeting opportunity, similar to an elementary model, and then giving them some time to transition to leave to make sure they can collect their things and work on some of those organizational skills and strategies. So we think that that would be a positive shift in our schedule. We also had an exciting month with some concerts, so I really want to thank Mr. Eber and Mr. Duffy. There were a couple of spectacular nights. In the beginning, I spoke about this last time, but Susical began at the beginning of May, and it just had great reviews. The talent is absolutely amazing at John Reed, and that should continue. We also had some of our students. I was lucky enough to go to Waterloo and hop in there and see the JRMS student artwork on display, which was so much fun. And I also want to recognize Maria Frederick, Christine Antipas, 8th grade social studies, and Danielle Lingo, 8th grade ILA. They were awarded the Connecticut Association of School Librarians Collaboration Grant for their work on the arguments that matter, where they used the New York Times student editorial contest to build an interdisciplinary unit across ILA and social studies on the 8th grade team. So that was really exciting for them and a great project for the students. And then this past week, we just had our second social of the year. So we're a little behind in our socials due to COVID, but we were excited to have the socials, and the PTA was really supportive and rented some inflatables. And unfortunately, if you have a 6th or 7th grader, they got rained out. We're happy to announce that on our field day on the 21st, the inflatables will be there. So same ones too, so that we're trying to keep everyone happy at the end of the year. And we have some 8th grade events coming up. I spoke about the in-school awards ceremony with 8th graders. Our Brownstone field trip is coming up next week, which was shared with Helen Keller Middle School, which we're really excited for that collaboration. We hope for that to continue into the future. And our moving up ceremony is Friday the 17th at 5 o'clock, and then directly after is the 8th grade dance from 6:30 to 9:30, which is a luau theme. We think everyone can make it work with the timing and their outfits, and we're going to provide ladies at the luau. Any questions?
And Megan, I just wanted, I know we have one more meeting left. I just want to thank you for your 1 year of service, Government Middle School. And it's going to be very difficult to find another leader with your passion and instructional leadership, someone that deeply cares about students and connects with staff, and really is a strong voice for staff, but is interested in moving teaching and learning forward. We'll talk a little bit more about that process later in the agenda. And hopefully we've got a lot of work to do between now and the end of the year, and one more board meeting left, but just in case, best wishes. But we can schedule it after us. We couldn't schedule it with these, that's right. But thank you.
Thank you.
I think there's, Mrs. DeConte and Mrs. Hinkler have a report for special education.
I don't think we have much. I don't think we have much to report. The only thing that I do want to just do, I definitely wanted to, we are moving over to a new IEP beginning July 1st. So not only do we have a new IEP that's going out, but there's also going to be a 504 portal as well. So section 504 IEP being rolled over into a new state portal. So we stated that beginning training tomorrow. This is what's called a pre-launch, so we can become familiar with the new interface that the state is initiating. So as the summer goes through, we will be training not only the staff, but promise that it will be user friendly, that parents will be able to have access to their children's documents much more readily, it's almost like real time. Of course, you get a login and they'll be able to see the documents in real time, just as we have. So we're excited to see what the new prospects will be. But it is a lot of work to work on, our cardinal staff has been tremendous, trying to make sure we got all the right information.
I would just say, Jen, that I think this is a very promising change, but I do worry about the timeline and transitioning from one system to another system. And the amount of training that will be required for staff, not just in using the new system, but there are some quality control, the way in which you have to develop goals and objectives and require data for those goals and objectives. So that there is going to be some training for our special education staff. And the state has really essentially piloted the new system and not left a lot of wiggle room between, piloting and implementation. And it did mean that the heavy lifting has been needed to be done by districts. So I greatly respect Jen's confidence and optimism that the new system is going to start July 1. However, there is a lot of work that needs to be done, and we need to bring everyone up to speed.
Not just like the tool or the format, but changing actual subject.
Well, it's the platform and the tool that's changing, but there are some increased expectations for staff members in terms of providing certain data to demonstrate that you've met goals and objectives. And do you want to talk a little bit about
Parts to this process. The first is that all of the staff by next year, there will be going what's called quality training for IEP, which the IEP goals and objectives right now are based on what the student present levels are. So the student has a weakness in the area of math. We develop goals and objectives to address those weaknesses. The change is now we have to align them not only to their skill set, but we also have to align it to the Common Core. So all of the staff now is going to be undergoing training to write better IEP goals and objectives. I think our staff does a great job overall, but it doesn't hurt to fine tune or tweak the process as we go along to standardize everything. So we've actually trained a core group this year with the understanding that they will help us turnkey and train it for the people in the building for next year. So we were allowed to send maybe about 5 or 6, between Easton and Reading. So they received the first wave of training. Both Jen Hankla and I have also run through the training. So we've already started to alert the staff as to this is the case studies that we have and so forth. But there is an expectation that every staff member across the state will go to the same training. So that's part A, and part B is in the pilot.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Dr. Pearson.
My report this month highlights the summer curriculum work that we have planned, and this represents sort of a return to the usual summer energy that takes place here in Reading. And I'm so excited to dig into this work. It's been a number of years of people really not feeling comfortable being in person together, and a pause on some important curriculum work. So I'm really excited to dig back into this. You could read through the report yourself, but you'll see some of it is quite specific to either level or content area, and other work supports the ER9 more tri-district work. So for instance, bridging the integrated STEM programs at the middle school so that it's a stronger foundation, which will ultimately strengthen the high school program. And also some 8-9 transition meetings, which is very helpful for the high school team to learn a little bit more about the students' strengths and needs that are coming through the system, and so that we can adjust the curriculum pacing accordingly. Just helps the students have an easier transition, and ultimately should increase achievement if they can differentiate more effectively. So This is a pretty lengthy report. I'm happy to answer any questions about any of the work.
How much of the work plan this summer would you say is sort of back to normal work as opposed to we're still sort of calibrating for COVID adjustments and learning that?
I would say the calibration is more comprehensive this summer than it was, say, 3 years ago. Pacing work always occurs in the summer, and that's done by our content specialists. And I would say it's found most specifically in the area of math. They need to have longer conversations about the existing gaps that may exist, and then also that some of the gains that the students have made this year. So while the pacing work always occurs in the summer, the conversations need to be a little bit more.
I guess sort of embedded in that question is this enough to both continue to move the district forward the way you want it to and to make up for those adjustments that are made for COVID?
That's an excellent question. I'd like to come back to it actually in the fall, because every summer we see a certain amount of just that summer loss that's often regained in the first month of school as students get back into the swing of things. And it's not immediately clear right now how much of the need will be able to be addressed through some of the differentiated pacing changes that will be done over the summer, and how much we might find in a future budget proposal. Okay, so we are acutely aware of some of the ESSER grants, which will be coming to an end in the next year or 2 years, and our students' needs come first. So we might find that we need to consider some staffing conditions.
I just don't want to lose sight of the fact that it's this sort of dual priorities of continuing the normal course and making up for the chapter.
Right. There have certainly been many more students receiving intervention support this year than in typical years. What's not clear right now is whether some of the adjustments that we're making, so I'll use reading as an example, our literacy specialists have met a number of times with me this spring to consider the research about the science of reading and how we can integrate more focused time within the reading block in the early grades on phonemic awareness and phonics instruction. That addition should really help to support some of our students, and in particular those that might not have had a typical preschool experience in the last few years. And so we are doing a number of things that we would be doing anyway, but certainly the loss that has been experienced during the pandemic has amplified the need. Right, so I would like to come back to the conversation in late fall after we do our initial assessments to really consider where we are and what we see in terms of student needs. But it's a very good question, because in some areas, I think the teachers would report the students have bounced back, and there have been so many positive changes, so much progress that they've seen over the course of this year. And then in other ways, if I look at intervention data, we still see a lot more kids in
I
intervention.
imagine the biggest worry is those kids who were pre-K, kindergarten, who missed a lot of that formative time, how much that sticks with them for the fourth element.
And the socialization, of course, is such an important part of those early years. But since we have been all in all year, that bodes well for those children. In addition, I also want to note that since we've had so many snow days this year, we will be in school for Juneteenth. So Juneteenth is now a federal holiday, and while we will not have the day off from school, our teachers will be given some resources so that they can really commemorate this important day, which marks the anniversary of the last African-American slaves being freed in Texas.
How's that supposed to work? Like if we had, like in future years, if we go past Juneteenth, will that be a day off in the future?
Well, that's a decision that needs to be made by the calendar committee. So you'll use Veterans Day as an example. For many years in Reading, that was a day when school was not in session. And then the calendar committee, in creating the calendar, decided, because it's a choice, that we would have school on Veterans Day, and actually spend a lot of time teaching about the importance of Veterans Day. And while some were really concerned about having a day off, not having a day off from school, that it would lose significance. Actually, I think the kids have much better understanding about it.
We're no longer beholden to the state's calendar mandates that.
No. Happily, no longer bound to the state's.
Have you been able to receive or review results of standardized testing we did this
No.
spring?
Not yet. So we are actually just finishing up. The standardized testing window just ended this week. So the students who needed to make, we really test throughout the entire month of May. Not that it takes 4 full weeks of school, but because it's an adaptive test, some students take a number of days. And then when you factor in makeups and getting everyone in the same place, it really stretches right into the first week of June. So later this month, I expect to have preliminary results, and then the state typically finalizes it a little later in the summer when they can sort of scrub the data and make sure.
So maybe this board will review in September.
Yeah, we typically do our standardized testing report in October, but we'll have some preliminary.
I didn't ask you something here to see what our progress was. Kind of recovering from. I'm sure you are. I'm sure you are.
Okay, good. Well, that concludes our administrative reports. There are some transfers that we'd like to discuss and some financial reports, but we do
Why don't
have
we do
another
those together? So to move to discussion of possible action. First item A is ARPA funds. The first item is RES playground project, and to bring everybody up to speed, the Reading Town meeting, a special town meeting appropriated $40,000 ARPA funds for the purpose of the recreation pavement project. Dr. McKinney put it out to RFP. He has received bids and report back to us.
Thank you. We submitted, we developed an RFP on May 13th. The RFP was released. We received bids on May 31st, and we opened bids, and we have 2 bids to. So the first bid is from Woolley Excavating and Paving out of New York in the amount of $74,000. And the second bid, here we go, from Bouchard Construction in the amount of $42,750. Both bids submitted their paperwork on time and provided the necessary documentation. We have a lower bid of $42,750 and a high bid of $74,000.
So we put those. A little bit.
So is that the pavement project, is the playground project?
Yes,
That's what's on here is playground project.
Who was the second outfit? Where were they at?
Bouchard Construction is out of Bethel, Connecticut.
This road, 5 miles.
So just to be clear, all we're asking for from ARPA is pavement and water filtration.
But we've already received $40,000 ARPA on pavement. And so we'll talk about other things for ARPA in a minute. But for right now, we've gone through the process of approving the paving projects. We're requesting it through ARPA. It's been approved by ARPA, approved by the select board, approved at the town meeting. Out to bids, and now we need to accept one of the bids and move that forward to contract. So
The difference is the ARPA, you approved $40,000 and this was $42,750.
and my expectation is we can find $2,750 in breakage.
I think we can.
So then we look for a motion to accept the proposal from Bouchard Construction and direct administration to congressional work. I think that motion is second. Laura, any discussion?
And yeah, and execute the contract.
Execute. That's what I heard.
Me too.
Discussion. Any, call the question, Gerard? Yours? Everyone in the room? Favor? Motion carries 5-0 to no Gerard abstaining.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I didn't realize I was on mute. Apologies.
Motion carries 6-0, which brings us to the second item under the ARPA funds question, which is the water filtration project. Dr. McKinnon.
So this is a new discussion that we're having with this group, but it's an old problem that we need to discuss. In 2017, there was a sanitary survey report which was conducted by the Department of Public Health. And in that report, they identified water quality issues over at Redden Elementary School. And there were a few things they talked about. The most significant issue was the issue of iron and magnesium that was coming in from the fed into the wells. And we have dealt with that problem over the years by spending funds on cleaning the water storage tank of water and magnesium buildup. And if you go into the building and you turn on the water, you actually do see discoloration based on the iron and the magnesium. The recommendation was to install a filter that was before the water storage tank to mitigate the iron and magnesium before it went into the storage tank, before it went into the building. And I have a memo dated March 25th, 2017. And the reason why this has come up again is because the Department of Public Health intends to survey the school this summer. And they go through, they have a checklist of various things that they look at. One of the things that they're going to be looking at again is this iron and magnesium problem. And we anticipate, based on communication that we have with our water vendor, that the first time they notified us of the problem, the second time they're going to, I think, perhaps require some corrective action. That corrective action could be, you need to come up with an action plan to address this, or it could be, according to our most recent communication, it could be, you need to correct this problem within 30 days. So essentially, I asked our water systems and solution design person to provide us with a quote on the work to remedy that issue, and that amount is $32,000. So we have a quote for the work, and we have documentation that kind of explains what the work would be, what work would need to be completed. The $32,000 includes the labor, the iron manganese removal filtering system, including the piping and the water testing that would go along, plus electricity controls to operate the system. So that is a request for $32,000. And that's the history of that report.
And this would get us off of bottled water.
No, that would not get us off bottled water, but it would reduce the cleaning of the storage tank for iron and magnesium. It would remove the coloring of the water, and it would satisfy the request from DPH as one of our what do they call it, a deficiency, or what do they call it? They call it a deficiency.
How is this related to code?
Mr. D'Agostino,
No, I didn't.
oh, I believe. I think there are a lot of projects right now being submitted to the town of Reading that perhaps might not meet the definition of code recovery, like the playground project that we just approved.
the categories that ARPA funds qualify for are water infrastructure improvements. So many of those are in towns, you know, putting in big water mains and stuff to provide, you know, added services to. But I think still water.
And ARPA funds can be used for provision of government services, and this can be government service. There's a broader question as to whether or not this is work that should be done through an ARPA request or through a direct capital request. Similarly, the town has already authorized $110,000 for this body cam through ARPA, which is similarly subject to that question.
I guess, I mean, why I'm really asking that is, I'm a little disappointed that this is all we're asking for. There's $2 million. And I feel as though there are many other things we could be asking for, like the emotional support, recovery rooms in schools, upgrading playground in school. I feel as though there are a lot of other things that can help the kids with their social emotional health. I'm sure there's plenty that we do with the curriculum, and I don't think that we're addressing that with ARPA. And there's no harm in asking, because the rest of the town is asking for a variety of things.
Another example being the work that you wanted to do on the second floor there, or yes.
There's a request coming out of RES for the project you described. I just have not had a chance to review that project. We can bring that forward. I just think there's a bottleneck with the central office in terms of getting the projects that are shovel ready and getting them towards you. And it's just, we need time. That's one of the things we really need. So I think these two projects that you have on the agenda tonight are shovel-ready projects, ready to go. But that doesn't mean that there aren't other projects, to your point, that we could.
Is there, my understanding is that the ARPA application will be at the end of May. Is that?
The representation made by the committee was that all projects received by May 31st would be reviewed, and those received after we reviewed subject to available remaining funds.
Okay.
And there are several projects that have indicated that are still in the works and are still coming.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'd love to see us asking for additional projects, because I don't really ask for enough yet.
About the water system or the filtration system. Most of those that I'm aware of require some sort of maintenance for removing material from the water. There's a lot of it. You know about the settling tank and how much material is in there to ensure you cleaned out. Do they give you any indication as to what maintenance would cost yearly basis? Or?
Well, maintenance will be reduced in terms of cleaning the storage tank, because the filters are in place before the tank.
Well, yeah, it's cleaning of filters, replacement of filters. Usually, it's probably a filter medium that has to be replaced. I'm guessing. Just wondered if that was going to be a significant number or not.
I can look into that.
It probably wouldn't keep us from saying, yes, we should do this. The water, yes, we can certainly use urban, but it might affect.
I think we have to do that. Sounds like we have to do it regardless, but
Yeah.
there would be a cost associated with it going forward.
Probably.
Then there's a cost associated with not doing it, which is the tank degradation, including possibly,
Right.
an enforcement action with the state.
Maybe zeros out. Well,
Right.
okay, yeah, I'm sorry.
Hopefully it's
Maybe
a wash.
it's a
No, no, no.
Sarah, could you look at what we've budgeted in maintenance and supplies and see if we budgeted the cleaning of the storage tank over at RES? I was curious whether we have that. Yeah, somewhere as a line item.
When I say $10,000.
And maybe, you know, when we don't have to do that, or we have to do it on the new system, maybe they balance each other out.
And it's the same place, cleaner water.
Yeah.
Coming out of that, that's true.
What were you talking about, bottle, Chris?
Well, because the school's already not drinking the water, so the subsequent question is what would it take to get to drinkable water in the building? And whether we should be talking about that.
So what's the word used for it?
Flushing toilets. That's it. And that's been the
Washing
case,
hands.
Flushing toilets, washing
that's been
hands.
the case for 5+ years.
And it's brown.
Are there any water fountains there or water fountains?
They want coolers.
Yeah, there
They
we
don't
have,
know.
yeah, so
Girls don't.
we've limited the water for a while with the COVID, we were doing bottled waters. We now have gone back to the traditional like Poland Spring coolers that are allocated throughout the building in different hallways for kids to fill up their water bottles.
And about 5 years ago, when this came up, the board at the time had a deliberation about whether to invest in remediating the problem, or I think it was about $9,000-ish in actual cost to provide bottled water. The ROI said, just keep providing the bottled water because you'll never make up the investment of fixing the problem.
The true fix was city water. The closest city water is Meadow Ridge. I think the number was 2 to 5 million or something. Or get it up there. Was that right? Actually, maybe that was John Reed.
That's what we tried.
That was John Reed.
So bottled water and supplies are budgeted for next year at $8,000. And there's also water treatment and service budgeted for $460. And then there is also water section budgeted at $165. There's also water, what's related to specifically to the pool. There's water treatment, that's $1,688. Yeah. So it's,
Actually, cleaning the tank 3 times a year is $11,000. This is an old.
oh, I see, it's not underwater, it's in the tank cleaning.
Yeah.
Got it. New keyword.
Yes.
That's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's probably the year. So, yeah, that's a lot.
And presumably you can do it less frequently.
Right.
So I can get you information on what it comes to change the filters, but
It's a surprise, you know, that, does that make it interesting?
Expensive buildings. So then what we look for, like the general consensus of this project is consistent with how we did the pavement, a motion to direct the administration to submit a proposal to the ARPA fund working group in accord with the presentations. And let Jason talk with you about the number. I think a motion. Right. Seconds, John, the discussion.
Yeah, it is, would we have to come back and do the RFP process again like we did with the?
So it's a good question, and I recall about 5 years ago, we did some minor water work, right, when I joined the board, I remember Scott Rice sitting in that room recommending $8,000 or $15,000 work or something, and we specifically said we were waiving the 3-bid requirement because of the specialized piece of work with a specialized vendor. And we could take that same action in a similar circumstance, or we could say because it's $40,000, let's go back up to RFP again, which is what it is.
It's quite well.
Is what it is.
Yeah.
My only hesitation is that if we push this forward for ARPA, then it it's the likelihood that something else gets approved. Well, I mean, we have to do this no matter what, right? I'm sure.
Meaning, we've already made one request, it was approved, here comes another request.
Yeah.
Does it keep us from making together?
Or just the aggregate.
So far, the third, anticipated request, I'm saying, that, okay, you've already asked for 2 things about that.
I don't think we had this in our capital plan. for.
I don't recall this item.
So this really came to light within the last couple of weeks with communication from Ron Black, which is from our water systems and solution vendor who works. He really is renowned as an expert across the state. He's done some work in our district and surrounding districts. And this is Dr. McKinnon, this is an unresolved situation. You've got DPH coming. I can take care of a couple of things, but this is you really need to come back. So this is not in our capital plan. And correct. So
That was amended the capital plan. If ARPA didn't exist, we would still have to take care of this.
Right, if ARPA didn't exist, if we're talking about either trying to squeeze it out of the existing operating budget or budgeting for it and operating or making it a capital request. The size of it suggests that it should be a capital item. And then that would go through the municipal process.
It's not included.
There's the alternate, there's sort of two spins on the motion also, which would be to direct the administration to pursue funding through ARPA or the town municipal process, or just the municipal process. But there's also the question of expediency and the extent to which this is approved through a special town meeting over the summer. It's done before there's any sort of enforcement action.
I have less confidence putting it in the capital improvement plan and getting it done in a timely manner before the state comes and survey their school.
Less confidence than using the ARPA process.
Why? Yeah. Yes.
Well,
That's
that's a good point, though. I mean, maybe we should make the motion to say, to give both options in case ARPA.
Right, to pursue an appropriate source of revenue to remediate the water project, whether that be ARPA, municipal, or other grant opportunities. Just cast the widest possible net and authorize the administration to the project.
I'd amend the motion to have both options there.
So, ARPA, municipal, or any other grant opportunity. Other discussion? Call the question, Sherrod?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0. Want to touch anything else ARPA related at this point?
No, just that there's a proposal that I need to review. And I know that there are other proposals from other groups in the town related to the schools that they've not come to.
So we're going to end up with at least one more meeting this month, and we can perhaps.
Do you need to do what they are?
Well, there is a proposal from a teacher over at RES for the Bridges program and training, professional development, and equipment for that program. And I also heard there's a request for a playground.
I asked you that.
On to fiscal year 2022 financial.
Okay, so Mrs. Froning has some documents that we're going to distribute to you. Oh, here it is.
Sherrod, it's coming by email.
They're just small.
Okay, so everyone have the materials. We're very grateful to Mrs. Stefani, who is helping me and central office team in looking at our accounts at the moment. And we developed a memo that the front, that 70% of the memo discusses transfers. I just would like Sarah to go through the list of transfers that you have in that memo.
So what you have in front of you, just a little background context. During the beginning of this particular year and at the end of last, there were some changes made to the chart of accounts. Not all of those changes were implemented at the beginning of the year. So as a result, the accounts do not always go back to what was intended. And so these updates represent an adjustment in those account codes. They don't have a real financial impact, but what they will do is to really help provide some additional transparency to where the accounts are coming. And each of these each transfer is over 25,000, so they need to be approved by the board. So looking at each one of these, so the very first one, you'll notice that account 112 is salary non-certified. And our IDEA grant was applied to that account, but 112 was actually broken down into smaller accounts. And so it really should hit the line of 126 for special ed classroom instructional aids. And so that needs to go into a different bucket in order to offset, in order to look like it is correctly offsetting the salaries.
Otherwise, it'd be in the red by $90,000.
So you'll also notice that that there also is the offset for preschool teachers by the tuition payments was budgeted in 111, but the salaries are paid out of 104. And so obviously what happens there is that it looks like the salaries have exceeded what is in there, what's in the budget, because the offset needs to be in the same account as where the salaries are drawn. We created 2 accounts for student transportation. We created 510 and 511. Well, when they redid the chart of accounts. And currently, all of the student transportation sits in account 510. It was really intended to break apart special education and transportation. And so there's an itemization of what should be in line in budget line 111 for all of the special ed buses.
On the first page, is that 23 or 24? Which school is the first line? Which school is the second line? The
Oh,
first line looks
on
like
the very
24.
first line is 23, and then it should be 24.
Please, the other way. The first one says, oh, shared with RES is 23. Okay.
And then you'll also notice that we changed our electricity, our gas, and our heating codes. And though it says in the name, do not use, we use them. So I'm going to fix that with your blessing. So that is, does anyone have any questions about any of those? You'll also notice for example, when you take a look at your budget object summary, if you could take a look, what you'll notice is it actually says on your budget object summary, it will say like electricity do not use. And instead of having funds in that account that are coded correctly under the budget object summary, this really serves to help clean that all up so that this will make a lot more sense and be more clear when you're looking at it.
We don't have any buses, right?
special education.
We don't own the buses.
Oh, we work with, First Student is the bus company. We have a relationship with them. All of transportation, we have general buses, general ed buses, and then we have special education. We have transportation that is a bus for special education students. So it's important to really forecast those a little bit differently. That's why they broke out the accounts. But what ended up happening, John, was that instead of putting them in the right, instead of saying, here's how much money goes in this account, here's how much money goes in this account,
I
we
understand.
just, oh, all right, okay.
I'm wondering why the
Do we,
bus fleet.
do we own them? I'm not sure. I know we have a relationship with First Student.
So we're paying bus cleaning
We,
fees to the vendor.
to the vendor, but I don't believe we own them.
No, we don't.
I would expect them to be, but it's related to COVID, it makes some sense.
Oh, this is this year's budget, yes. So when they were budgeting, this is right now. And so they would have put all bus cleaning into the budget right now, this year, in anticipation of needing to clean them for COVID.
Last year.
That is for last year, for this year. But in this year's budget, there's not extra bus cleaning included in the coming budget because it wouldn't make sense to put it in there.
So these expenses were approved in, say, March of 2020.
And originally, at the beginning of that year, we had a whole conversation about reopening.
Yes, and made the decision at that point to have the buses cleaned at a much greater frequency than.
Do you want to stop there?
Yeah,
Is it transfer?
Yep, and there's a kind of a motion to.
It's not like, or work a little bit, what's your?
I can talk about the
Yeah, sure.
transportation. So for, there were some questions about transportation. So I have some answers for you. So this basically shows that all of it was connected together. So the estimate of where we're going to land for all of transportation is, you'll notice that it's there, the estimate to June 30th. So we are in the red, $15,211.44 for transportation. You asked about driver credits, buses that do not run for half or full days. We get a credit back from the bus company for that. We get $510 back for the full day, $255 back for the half day. We track that on a spreadsheet every day with all the bus runs. And we also receive credit for time that the bus is running without service. So without servicing kids, so when the bus is empty, so when it drives from its last stop to the depot or goes to wherever it goes, it's called a deadhead. That's something I got to learn. And so that's an estimate of $3,000 based on what has happened in the past for bus transportation. So we'll actually get that credit at the end of the year, but that's an estimate in there for you.
And then 5-10 full day, that's not a credit to Reading, that's a credit to the 3 districts.
The $1,836
No, when a bus doesn't run, it's 5, 10, 22 for a full day.
for a full day.
We only see a third of that.
That's correct,
In
yes.
most instances, I think some buses put 2 in. most
Yes. Depending on the split, it's broken up.
For every 10 days it's out of service, we're seeing $1,800.
And they track that, they actually track it with different percentages so that we also keep track of it. So the bus company keeps track of it, and then we also have also track that as well. Just to double check. Just to double check to make sure that we
Does
drive.
it always jive though?
You know what, so far it has, so that's good. So far, so good.
That's good. Know that you're checking.
Does anybody have any questions about it?
$9,592 divided by 510 gives you 18 full days without a bus over the course of 5 months. I guess if you multiply 3, it's 56 days without a bus, but just running. anecdotal experience, having a child who basically hasn't had a bus all semester suggests that number is plus.
We do track every day, I'm happy to share the spreadsheets.
Just looking for everything.
And by the bus run, we track it by the bus run, it's really based on the driver, so, but if anyone would like to take a look at it, I certainly can.
Glad to make sense.
I did a deep dive into the bus runs. So there we go.
So I think that is, the bulk of this communication is really about transfers. We have a motion to transfer according to the memo here.
So we're looking for the first motion, which is to move that the board authorize the transfer of funds as reported by the superintendent, direct budget entries for the 21-22 school year. And in the interest of clarity, that's from 112 to 126, from 111 to 104, 510 to 511, 622 to 52, 623 to 53, and 624. Right, I'll make the motion before any discussion on the motion. Hearing none, call the question. Sharad?
Sorry, yes.
Leave the room. Motion carried unanimously 6-0. On to the next financial item.
Okay, so Sarah and I will work together on this, but you have the budget object summary in front of you. And if you skip to the last page, you can see unexpended at approximately $1.3 million and encumbered at approximately $2.3 million, of which $1.3 million is paid salaries that have been encumbered. The 1.3 million, that we have been watching our spending closely for the past 3 to 4 months. And we didn't freeze the budget, but we have been monitoring spending because we've been concerned about our health benefits account and claims for this year. So I can share with you just a slide. It's probably more helpful to start.
While that comes up, I just want to I just double checked, and the way that it actually works is that it's divided out by, it's 2/5 credit because it's 2 schools. So it actually is a 2/5 that then is combined, so it's slightly different, but it's still very similar.
Oh.
Dismiss that warning. So you can see here on the screen, I think Sharad, you can see from home, that if we start with our health benefits account and our claims, you can see that the current balance of the health benefits account is $28,998. This is the most up-to-date data.
That's with every contribution swept to it that we expect of this year.
That's the balance as of today, which included our main claims of $304,744, which included the $19,665 administration fee. We do not currently know what our June claims will be, but you could probably have a rough estimate of around $250,000 to $270,000. And if you added the fee, that could be a June, around 300,000. The projected health benefits account is currently at 28,000, and we have about a $300,000 June claim, including the admin fee. The projected health benefits account could be a negative 270,000. Depending what you consider a healthy health benefits balance being between 2 to 3 months, it's approximately $700,000. And so your transfer needed, if we have a deficit of 270,000 and our target is approximately 700,000, then we would need to transfer about $970,000 from unexpended funds into our health benefits account. So if we go back to the budget object summary and you look at the unexpended budget, unexpended budget is approximately 1.3. However, as I demonstrated, we probably need to transfer at least 970,000 of that unexpended funds into the health benefits account, which leaves us really an unexpended value of 300,000 to 400,000, depending on how much money we put in the health benefits account. And of that 300,000 to 400,000 between now and the end of the year, we anticipate spending is the bottom line. So where we anticipate spending that to $250,000 in special education costs. We have money set aside for substitute teachers. We could easily spend that money. We haven't been buying everything that we needed for the past 3 months because we've been worried about the health benefits account and claims. And we've gone through these accounts and we've identified that we need monies in various areas.
The first couple of items that you mentioned weren't already budgeted for those.
Yeah, yes, but they are actually counting as unexpended. So
It's still yet to be accounted for.
yeah, so I'll give you an example. If you go to special education.
Substitute for $70,000 sitting unexpended. Yeah, teachers with tuition reimbursement. Tuition payments are budgeted in 1 month. Oh, the offset is in 111. Well, maybe more. The tuition payments are going to show up. They're offsets.
Let me see, 563. So 563, $247,000. That's showing in the unexpended column. We expect to spend that or close to all of that money on out placement tuition and transportation.
Invoices that are still due.
Correct.
No, it's
So
actually 267.
So that one line budgeted at 428, currently paid 181.
Consider it fully paid.
Yeah, the 181.
Well, I would say to consider it needing to be fully spent. So you can take 270 right off of the unexpended.
Right. If it's all due.
What's the philosophy of providing covering those tuitions? Supposed to be covered.
well, I think we, in talking to Mrs. DeConte today, that we're still working with vendor and getting some invoices and working with a family. So those special education costs.
It's not sufficiently far.
Simple way to put it. So there's not much, when you consider that we need to transfer approximately $900,000 into our benefits account, we're really looking at 300,000. And there are a lot of areas in which we need to spend those funds.
And I also sort of view this slightly differently in that we started the year with $500,000 sitting in the health claims account. Consider where it bottomed out, was transferred. If we say put it up to $500,000, that was all gone by the fall, and we eat for every penny that was budgeted for it. So we are, if we're projecting to be minus 270, that means we're $770,000 over budget on health insurance. And so the first $500,000 is really to repay ourselves out of the health claims. And then, well, really the first 770 is to do that because you need to make your account get to zero. You need to make your account get back to where it was. And then you're looking at the budget as of what's left. So the unexpended of 1.3, you've got to almost take 770 right off the top before you start talking about what's unexpended, because that's just to put your money back in your bank.
This, we usually have this discussion towards the end of June. And, when we're a little closer, especially on the unexpended number, a little closer to where we're going to end up being. I personally like the way we go about this motion, in June, which is to, set a number for the reserve and, which, we authorized to top up the health account. Yeah, to reach a target number, with the rest of the unexpended funds going back to the town. I'm comfortable with that. I'm comfortable with 500. I know that 500 didn't get us there this year, but we lowered, or we didn't take Brown's recommendation in the budget cycle a year ago. We were actually under their recommendation. We took their number this year, which is a much higher number. So I'm personally comfortable with a $500,000 balance in that account.
I mean, the issue is that
Knowing we have much more in this.
if the recommendation is typically 2 to 3 months, and our target has moved from 2 months being $440,000 dollars to now 2 months being $560,000 or $600,000. The formula has moved the number up on us more so than we would change our philosophy. We could stick to keep it close to 2 months theory, but keeping it close to 2 months is now
276 times.
Exactly, yeah.
right, it's 550 basically. And to get you to 550, you're looking at.
And you started this year at minus 89,000 in health benefits account. You're going to start next year at minus 270.
If we hit it, there's 270 next month.
Right.
We're at minus 89, but then we topped it up to 500. Now we're at minus, well, we're predicted to hit minus 270. We're going to top it up to something. But if we hit that 270, that would top, what's the motion, the 800 or the 970? I see the 800.
It really is, it's really a discussion between you need to decide whether you go, if you want 700,000, then you need to transfer 970. If you want less than 700,000 as your starting balance, then you can go less. So this number really is X insert value.
We're trying to avoid having a second meeting in June, or is that second meeting happening?
The second meeting is scheduled right now.
Yeah.
If we're able to bottom out on this for everybody's comfort, we might not need the second. That's, The other question is what we anticipate changing in the next 3 weeks to. If anything.
You can say, you authorize us to transfer up to a certain value, and then give us the ideal starting place for the health benefits account. And depending on where June claims are, or how everything else plays out, we can adjust that number to get to that target.
Didn't we say in one of the meetings, there were certain individuals that may be retiring? Just what I'm trying to get at, do you think we're going to spend more, less, or the same come here? That might have an impact on the side. So
We have a whole lot more budget for next year already.
Yeah,
I don't have that number.
I mean, it's very conservative budget there, so I think, I'm comfortable on that. So.
Part of, it's kind of, the way that this account gets used creates sort of a level of fuzziness around it. It's primarily a cash flow vehicle, so that on July 3rd, when Vicky gets claimed, or on August 3rd, when she gets claimed the previous month, she can pay the invoice out of a balance that exists without having to go to the town and say, now I need you to advance the additional $500,000 to pay these claims. It's a cash flow smoothing technique. And so as a result, early in the year, we're effectively borrowing from it to pay down claims. And ideally, get back to more or less the same place at the end of the year because we budgeted the amount for claims. What it's become is this elastic account where we dip into it, we draw it down in the year, and then we sort of try to reconcile at the end of the year. Personally, I feel more comfortable with the course of the year, knowing where we are against budget, making more intermediate moves than just sort of draining the account and saying, okay, it's at zero now, what do we do about it? So I sort of am reluctant to say, let's use this as a hedge against what we budgeted. I think we should always trust what we budgeted and know that this has to exist as a cash flow vehicle in the background and not necessarily as a hedge against what could happen. The reality is we're now staring at the completion of a second consecutive hard negative claims year, which has forced us not to only to use it as a cash flow vehicle, but also as a pure backstop and reserve to get us through. What's been helpful is that in each of the past 2 years, we've been able to transfer back into the account to make it whole again. So we're not sitting here saying, and what I was concerned about in March, would we be sitting here now saying, there's nothing left in the budget and there's nothing left in the health insurance account. So we have overspent, we've essentially overspent our budget by the amount of the reserve. We spent another $5 million. I am relieved that we're not there. And so the first thing I think is an absolute no-brainer is to take the $500,000 and put it back there. So that's a $770,000 transfer that I think has to happen to get us back to where we were. So close up the budget year and say, here's what we didn't spend, here's what we spent. Then the second question becomes, with that delta, what do we do with it? Part A is, do you say because claims are up, the 2 to 3 month target is up, so the appropriate cash flow number has to go up to allow it to cover? Do you say there's another use of those funds, I'm going to take the risk that 500 is enough to keep my cash flow problems? Or C, do you say, let's just walk away from the rest of it, return it to the town and say we're going to keep the $500,000, that's it, depending on where everything breaks, which comes special.
We put 550,000 in reserve, that's still covering 2 months.
I'm comfortable with that. I think I'm comfortable with the transfer. In the past, we haven't put a number on the transfer because this really wasn't, we had estimates, but it gets better the closer we get to the end of the month in June. So we said, you transfer amount that would bring the, health balance up to.
We have a benefit because it's June 7th instead of June 2nd, of having to make claims numbers. In most years, we don't have to make claim numbers, we say during June. Between now and June 28th, we will know nothing more about all the things that come out. But that said, I think that it is, if we wanted to do this in 2 phases, we could tonight say, let's take 770 or 850 or whatever it is, authorize that transfer. Then come back in 3 weeks and say, okay, Dr. McKinnon, we moved that over. You've worked with Ms. Del Conte, you understand what the special ed situation is. Now where do we think the plan is going to land? And then you have a conversation at that point about there's $100,000 there, there's $0 there, there's $300,000 there. At that point, as you're saying, it makes sense to fund the health insurance additionally. It makes sense to fund the water projects directly. It makes sense to apply it towards, you know, whatever else is out there. Is sort of one way to bifurcate the conversation. If you want. I think that it's essential to at least restore the balance. Because I don't want anybody in the community thinking there's $1.3 million left over and spent, because we've overspent the health insurance by $770,000. So the 1.3 completely illusory.
I mean, I'd love to create a scenario where we say, you know, if this happens, then go ahead. And if that doesn't happen, then we can reconvene. But I'd love to create a situation where we don't have to.
One year, Mike, we did put tax in health insurance, and then once, if there's more money left, advance the Vera payments of why. And then if there's still money left, do this, and then off to the town.
And we got a multi-items, a little bit more complicated.
I just one other point I want to make is that because we're worried about our claims and our health benefits account balance, we constrained spending over the past 3 months. We were not buying things that the schools and our principals and our teachers were asking for in order to get this balance that were budgeted. And so we're constraining money and we're making decisions to move things into the future. There was an auto scrubber machine from RES that's broken. And so that repair of $2,500, I said, don't spend it now. I don't know where we are right now. So I'm denying this request, submit this request in July. So we're going, you know, a couple of weeks without cleaning the floor using this machine, and we just put that money into next year. So that's just one example. So we did constrain spending because we were worried of claims and health benefits. And that's the unintended consequence.
Right, and your concern is that by freezing spending to preserve us from running out of money, now that we can correct for and solve for that by finding known savings in certain lines.
Right.
The question is, should we now say all of these things that we're budgeted for a year from now, we should actually acquire because we budgeted for them and they were approved, as opposed to just maintaining the artificial spending freeze that we don't think we need.
So if we change this to say 820,000, so that would cover the negative balance of 270, and it would keep us the balance of 580. So if we approve that amount right now, then we still have the authority to, you know, use those funds for all those projects we just talked about, the water filtration that we did.
We're talking about if you figure there's 250 in special ed in addition to the 820,
Yeah.
what we just talked about, then that's $1,070,000, which would leave about 250 or 1.1-ish% of the budget to drive down the balance here.
That was comfortable.
We're doing the transfer now because of cash flow problems we've had in the past in July and August versus, you know, in the past we said, here's the target for the health balance. When all the dust settles, you know where the numbers ended up, top it up to that level, and then, you know, then whatever's left over, we specify that too. So,
I mean, another way to think about it, Mike, is
why wouldn't we do that?
if we sat here 3 weeks from now, if we pretended this conversation never happened.
Yeah.
We sat here 3 weeks from now, if Dr. McKinnon said, I looked at the numbers and we have 1.3 million, it's going to take 800 to cure the health insurance, got 500 left. I can call up Megan and Melissa and I can say, I said no to this request and this request. Now I can approve it because I know I have this flexibility. He would come to us on June 28th and say, we need $1 million to move the health insurance. I've got $1 million. And everything else will be committed because I reserved this to make sure that you can do it different. And the question is, will we get to the exact same place as we do right now?
It's much more efficient to work backwards from a target of an amount you want to set the HSA, the health benefits account. If you want it there, then you have the flexibility to make the transfer and target it. And then we have money left over that we can spend accordingly. And if we have additional money left over, you can make another motion for it to go elsewhere.
And we could make a transfer on health benefits now, or we could do none of it right now, and we've all the 3 weeks and give you sort of the informal guidance right now, which is that it sounds like people are moving in the direction of, we want it to be 550 on July 1st. Ergo, do what you need to do to have it be 550 on July 1st.
In other districts that I've worked in, that where we're not self-insured and we're in June and we have $1 million left over, the conversation is much more about, this is what our planned expenses are for the end of the year. This is what we really anticipate the unexpended bucket to be. Let's tackle the water project. Let's put money in this situation. Let's put money over here. It's harder to have those plans when the biggest stone that is for you is the health benefits.
Constant source of anxiety.
Right. So you'd be comfortable if we established a target?
I would be much more comfortable with establishing a target. And you said, we give you authority to transfer up to a certain value. And then we can hit that value and we can watch expenditures between now and June 30th. The goal to hit that value.
Transfer what is necessary to hit the target in the HPA.
Yeah.
So that the administration knows that 920 or whatever it is protected money, and
I think your health benefits account should be between 600 and 800,000. Based on last year's, based on your 3-year, your prior 3-year claim average was 222, but the current year to date is 376, which 276, which I don't think includes that.
well, this report is part of my one is a mess, because it says March is 730,000, April is 343, that's 0 for May. So,
I don't think this includes May, which we know was just high.
but I thought April was like 1 something. So,
Right.
I don't think that. Yeah.
So, okay, so if we said our target is 600,000, what would you like to see as the?
So if the target was 600,000, the transfer was 870.
Right, but it is, and you're okay with that amount? You don't want us to-
I wouldn't go lower.
Okay,
Is your question, you'd rather have us approve the target balance or the transfer?
oh.
This
yeah,
is-
doesn't matter.
Yes. So
Would you rather have us approve a target balance? in
Oh,
the
or target
HPA account,
right.
or the transfer,
Right.
or the transfer amount? Gotcha. And I'm thinking it's a little early, you don't know June claims yet.
Yeah.
And you're right, in the past, we haven't even known May claims, so we're like, okay, let's just make sure we end the year at this time.
I understand. So if you say the target balance in the health benefits account is 600,000, then I can adjust the slider based on
What
our
actually happens.
plans.
Right.
But the issue then becomes you're making adjustments in the next fiscal year. Because you won't know that June plans
Making adjustments
in the next fiscal year. So if you've got to make those considerations in June, and you don't know June, July, that's July, you're kind of.
How do we normally do it?
Well, you transferred last year.
Last year, we said we were going to transfer up to a certain amount, and it ended up being split the whole way.
Right, so we never hit the target last year.
You transferred.
I think we said we
all
wanted,
that
I think we said we wanted everything up to 600, and then anything over 600 goes back, and there wasn't 600 to go.
Right.
It sounds like we should transfer. But maybe, what the target balance is.
It's a transfer not based on target. Which I think 600 is.
So I mean, basically, if we go back to this, the sort of style of motions we made at this time or later, past years, it's directed to transfer sufficient unspent funds to the health claims account, such that it reaches an amount of no more than, X.
Yeah.
And any monies above and beyond that go to why, or why it's typically been the time. But just to be abundantly clear, if we go in that direction, that is not saying that you are directed to not spend anything else over the next 3 years.
Right, it means on June 30th, there's money left over goes to the town.
Correct. But if you need paper this week, you buy paper this week. It's not a,
Okay, that would work.
Yeah.
my handle it tonight.
There's a third draft motion up here. Does it affect this discussion? Or Zach?
Yeah. I wanted to, I'm making a presentation later about security. And I'll be talking about some options. And that could be another way that you thread that needle. You make a motion to transfer money for the health benefits reserve, and the delta at the end of the year go towards security or go towards something else. That's just an example of something that you, but I don't mean to, I'm very satisfied with where you landed on the health benefits account.
Let's do that first then.
Okay.
And not specify yet what happens with it
Well, I think that the remainder,
after we get to 600.
I think the remainder would go to the town. I think it's basically on June 30th, when the clock strikes midnight, that which is not encumbered for a qualified purpose, the current fiscal year, would transfer to the health insurance up until X.
Yeah.
At which point, to the extent there is excess, it would flow over to the town board. Save it.
You have to specify that, or I mean, I would think why, but you want to be flexibility for this.
I think if we are characterizing it as on June 30th, this is what happens, then if the administration hasn't spent it by June 30th, they're sort of, the clock strikes midnight anyway.
This may end up getting spent by the third month. Spent. Can you write a motion up there, just so there's a lot of discussion?
Let me, I'm sharing.
That includes the whole town thing.
I can
All that.
possibly do one better, I'll see if I can find last year. So I think what I did last year, was not used before. One set of minutes on the website. Last year.
Chris, can you share that once you've written it, please?
Once I've got it. So last year, we had a motion that the Board of Education authorized the Director of Finance and Operations to, one, not accelerate their payment schedule for next year, the current year, two, use unspent funds to fund health insurance up to $600,000, three, return any remaining money to the town of Reading. That's what we also landed on. That was a discussion about acceleration of their payments that they ended up making.
And so what happened there was that you had a negative balance of 89,000.
Right.
And so then you put in 300,000 and 283,000, less than 600.
Right, so it was almost as much.
Right.
So we set a target number of 600.
We set a target of 600, there wasn't 600 there, but every penny went there.
Right.
And so if we do that, this year. Superintendent.
This is not a Chrome application, so I cannot share that. I can copy paste it. Look at that. I'll email it to you.
So, right now, what Jason LaFleur has created is move the Reading Board of Education authorize the superintendent to, one, transfer unspent funds as of June 30, 2022 to fund the health insurance reserve to a balance of no less than X, and two, to return any remaining money to the town of Reading. I would just change health insurance reserve claims fund.
There's no longer on it.
Yes.
No less than it's striking is not the right.
That's not the phrase we're looking for.
Yeah. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like up to. Period.
No, this is on my Google site. So can you
If
see?
you can share that with me, I can edit it live, or you can edit it. It's fine. You just type.
Oh, I know. Yeah, but what would I like to say? But Shrag is saying yours is pretty right now online.
Yeah, let me take this share down, you can share yours, sure, I can see the line document.
I was able to read it.
But we've changed the language.
Okay. So you want to change this part?
Health insurance place.
To a balance up to.
Reserve to claims fund. Saving certain remaining unspent funds, just to keep the same nomenclature if you wanted to.
Yeah, instead of up to. Just 600. Yeah.
What should be two? Yeah. Apply there, right? It's not, no. Yeah. Your number. Second. Further discussion, Sherrod, you can see the active motion.
Yes.
No further discussion. We call that question, Sherrod.
Yes.
In the room. Motion carries unanimously. Have your direction, Dr. Nick.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Anything else on financial update?
No, that is it. Yes. Thank you.
On to administrator hiring updates.
Okay, great. Well, over the past 6 weeks, there was a team at John Reed Middle School, including myself and Dr. Pearson Hugo and Ms. Ward and John Reed Middle School faculty. And we were interviewing for an assistant principal opening because Darlene is retiring in this year. We got pretty close to the finish line where we were close on one candidate in particular, and that time aligned with Megan accepting a position in Weston. So I asked that we pause the hiring of the assistant principal position, and we have since posted for a principal position. And I would recommend that we hire a principal and with a committee of John Reed faculty. And then once we have a principal in place, that that principal is part of the hiring process for the assistant, which could be the same pool of candidates that we reviewed for the assistant principal position. We extended the invitation to the board. It was a very busy time of year. We did not get representation from board members on the committee. And if you would like to be on the committee to be involved, that would be my recommendation.
Can I suggest we chat out the process after how we hired Melissa this winter?
Yes, absolutely.
And I think in that instance, we created a personnel search committee of the whole to allow the board to engage in some private dialogue and meet directly with the candidates and private without a public meeting. But also granted you considerable discretion to sort of drive the process with our input.
Right. And that process included screening. We had 40 candidates. Dr. Pearson Hugo and I narrowed the field down to a certain number of candidates. We had a committee, which included 3 board members. Actually,
We had past, it was a
past
whole,
and current.
the way it overlaps is a bit of a mess.
Yeah, we had past and current board members. We had first round interview. That in person.
It was just later.
And then we had a second round performance task with Spider, which was Melissa.
I remember.
And then we had another, and we brought the successful candidate. Which would be prior.
And the personnel search committee, not the candidate information.
Right.
When did you hold those meetings?
Well, we just posted the position, typically a posting lasts approximately 2 weeks. So we wait until the end of the 2-week period. And at that point, everyone who's applied for the position, we start reviewing applications. But I would like to format, get the committee organized before that point, so that we're ready to go as soon as the 2-week window closes, with screening the candidates and getting our first, second round.
Right, but I assume you're interviewing during the day.
Oh, I'm sorry, John. We do both. We interview during the day, sometimes we interview in the evening. When we get to that point, we can certainly, depending on who's on it.
And the timing is going to be complicated if we bridge into the period of time the faculty is here, they said with their availabilities.
That's right, bless you. Yeah. I mean, we could do a first round by Zoom, do a second round in person.
And we'll know pretty soon with the application with the close, whether we should talk about this from an HR perspective or from principals.
Right.
How satisfied were you with the pool candidates for assistant?
How many candidates do we recall? How many candidates we started with? 89.
No, because Megan and I did Zoom screenings of.
I screened 89 down to 17. We did Zoom screenings for the maybe
We had a strong pool.
17.
It was 2 days.
Just,
Yes, it was a.
I just wonder what that pool is going to be like. 2 weeks from now. Well, wait, I mean, if we want to hire principal first, how long is that going to take us? Months, right?
A similar situation with an RES principal. Years ago, and we were very pleasantly surprised by the candidate pool and our ability to pull together a committee, conduct interviews and. it's successful.
I guess it's
And that
really-
Terry
it's a
West
good time
were
to- yeah,
left in June and we,
Were there
That was
more
in
than
June.
one candidate that were great?
in that
I
situation,
just
yes.
wonder if you're
Yeah,
gonna
this
lose your great candidate.
People start getting
next year. Yeah, not gonna happen, right, or whatever it takes us, however long it takes us to get the.
There's really no way of knowing until you get the candidate pool when you review them.
I know what you're trying to do, and I agree, it's nice to have a principal. Agreed.
When did they have it? Is that in July?
It was,
It was after the school year ended.
yeah, it was after the school year.
I don't know what it's, it wasn't right before the school year began, it was, they got closer to that.
So,
And there's no shame in looking at the pool and saying, there's nobody here for us, what, how can we adjust and do an interim? So to facilitate this, my number one mind is I would look for a motion to form a personal search committee of the whole for the purpose of evaluating and recommending candidates for the position of principal director. And appoint the entirety of the board to the. Right. Any discussion? I call the question, Gerard,
Yes.
in the room. Carried unanimously. And so what we look for, Dr. McDivitt, if you wanted to put together sort of a timeline and a schedule of which proposals, you can now email the personal search committee and we can have that conversation to make sure we're all in instruction. So I want to be considerate of folks who are coming and going throughout the summer and we can jump in by email this way.
Right.
Any other hiring of which let me show?
No, that is.
Any other vacancies, sir?
Please.
And the board received an update on the finance operations technology position today also, and so look for a tri-board meeting. So that brings us to review of security report and associated capital expenditures. And Dr. McKinney, do you intend this to be entirely a public session?
I think yes, I think we should go to executive session.
Okay, then what I'm going to do is suggest that we pass on this item from D until after we do E policy review, because then we'll have back-to-back executive sessions, and I don't want to crowd the public out for much longer. So that'll bring us right to D, which is the review, which is policy review. And so. As the board will recall from our May meeting, we first read a batch of policies at the time we're on Schedule A of it. Since that time, some policies have been withdrawn from the proposal, some policies have been revised, and some policies have been postponed for the purpose of further consideration. The board has received, I don't know if everybody noticed, the policies that are up for a second reading this evening. And so I would look for a motion to accept for a first reading those policies contained in. First, you said first reading. I meant second. Okay. I would look for a motion to accept for a second reading and to adopt the motion, the policies that are on Schedule A. And those policies are the policies related to automatic external defibrillators, deadly weapons of firearms, cleaning programs, non-discrimination as it applies to the community, pesticide application for school property, school safety plans, safety and security plans, smoking, use of school facilities, visitors, volunteers, holds and destruction of records, retention of electronic records and information, uniform treatment of recruiters, code of conduct for child nutrition program, disposal of obsolete and surplus equipment and material, IDEA compliance, school activity fund, abuse, neglect of disabled adults, alcohol, tobacco, and drug fire workplace, athletic coaches, evaluation, determination, child abuse, and neglect reporting, code of ethics, employee use of district computer systems, employment, and student teacher checks, non-discrimination as to personnel, life, minority recruitment, psychotropic drugs, section 504 as it relates to personnel, sex discrimination, harassment in the workplace, sudden cardiac arrest, awareness, administration of medications, attendance truancy, chronic absenteeism, chemical health for student athletes, child sex abuse and assault response reporting, drug and alcohol use by students, education stability procedures, food allergies and or infectious storage disease, health assessment screening, homeless students, non-discrimination as to students, physical activity, student discipline, pledge of allegiance, restraint and seclusion, search and seizure, section 504 as to students, student discipline, student use of computers, district computer system, suicide prevention intervention, sunscreen application at school, use of technology devices by students, curricular exemptions, homework, IDEA, alternative assessment, parent and family engagement policy, parental access to instructional material, promotion and retention. And that's all change logs as to the policy provided to the board. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Look for that motion to adopt those for a second. Thank you. Brett started the second. Is there a second to that motion? Second for a second. I will second. And Chirag, second motion. Thank you. Any discussion on this motion?
Speaking just for myself, I have not caught up to you and the policy committee that's been doing this work over the course of the year. I'm not finished with my review of all these policies. There's so much here. Not trying to diminish the work that you've done. Just I'm not there yet. I need more time.
With respect to which?
All. I'm uncomfortable voting for a policy that I haven't fully read yet, and there's a lot here. And this being a volunteer position, it's still volunteer, right? I haven't made it through.
Would you give it?
Haven't made it through to the end.
Any additional discussion? There is no additional discussion. We'll take a vote on a motion which is to adopt the aforesaid policies. All in favor of adopting the aforesaid policies, starting with Chirag.
Yes.
Everybody in the room in favor? Opposed? Motion carries by a vote of 4-2. And then that moves to the second motion, which is to
Where's the list of policies to repeal?
it's the same one as last month. So the second reading would be to adopt the repeal of all existing policies with the exception of 3160.1 regarding transfer of funds, 3520.13 regarding data protection, 3280 regarding gifts, grants, and requests, 3323 regarding soliciting prices, bids, and quotations, the series 3541 regarding transportation, 4111 regarding recruitment and selection, 5131.911 regarding positive school climate and response to bullying, 5125 on student records, 5145 the series Untitled 9, and the existing bylaws of the board, which is series 9000. So we look for a motion to repeal all existing policies with the exception of those listed. Absence of that repeal, we would now have 230 policies. Laura? There a second?
I'll second.
Steph? Any discussion with respect to the repeal of these policies?
Did you list 51, 41, 28?
No, which is 51.
It's the massive. But it's the
That would
massive.
be contemplated amongst those repeals. It's not on this list. No further discussion on the repeal of these policies. Call the question, Chirag.
Yes.
Those in the room? Carries 4-2. That then takes us on to back to school security and associated capital expenditures. Would you like to start this public session to get all in executive session?
I think we should take it into executive session and there might be an opportunity to provide
Some of it, yeah. So we'll look for a motion to enter executive session to discuss matters pertaining to school security. And would you like to invite anybody besides the superintendent?
No.
Okay. And to invite the superintendent to attend and say good night to Dr. Christie Gall. Motion from Mike, is there a second? Laura, all in favor, Sherrod? Sherrod?
Yes.
That's unanimously, we'll go into executive session at 9:01 AM.